Bloomfield Development Corporation. And the Bloomfield Development Corporation, BDC, is the neighborhood community development corporation in this neighborhood. In addition to doing a lot of work in the public space and business district, and a lot of transparency in terms of community meetings about development or city projects going on in the neighborhood. We also have a lot of investment in our anti-racism and intersectional work. So this is a project of our intersectional anti-racism committee, and we've wanted to have this event specifically since when Jim Rogers tragically lost his life a few blocks over from here, just off Friendship Avenue, a little over a year ago after an interaction with the police. And so we're very happy to be hosting some of our local elected officials, some fantastic service providers, to think about what are some alternatives that we as community members, members of the public, citizens, can have to keep ourselves, our neighbors, our community safe, and possibly explore different options than calling the police when there are instances in our neighborhood that might be our first instinct. Yeah, excited to hear from our wonderful panel members, and also let's have our micro facilitator introduce himself.
So, hi everyone, I am Julian McLean, so I'm also on the BDC board and the Anti-Intersectional Racism Committee. You may also know me from the neighborhood. I am the program manager at Trinity Pittsburgh, and we are right on the Big Avenue across the street from Caliente Pizza. And we do a lot of art and activism work, especially in the queer BIPOC community. But we're excited, like I said, Joy said, for you all to be here today. We're going to have some conversations around some alternatives to calling the police as authorities on situations that may not need those authorities in those situations. So we have some local officials here with us, some organizations that do a lot of great community work, and we're excited to have that community conversation. So we're going to start off by having our panel members. We're going to start off by having our panel members introduce themselves and just tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are, and we'll start on the other side down with that.
And then once we have the initial about 5 minutes for panel members, we have some prepared questions, but we'd also love to hear questions from you. We're going to do those in writing, so there should be little sticky notes around. If you don't have one, raise your hand. Heather in the back is going to be our question master. If you've written out a question, just raise that up in the air, and we will be asking this to our panel members later on. What? No, you don't have to say.
Hi, thank you. My name is Mark DeFelice, and I'm with the Resolve Crisis Center. I just want to thank everybody involved in tonight's event for including us in this discussion. For those of you that don't know about Resolve, I left some cards and some pamphlets in the back, and we're the county's crisis center, and every county in Pennsylvania has one. Ours is rather large, as you can imagine, with our population. We're glad to be involved in these types of discussions because we feel we are an alternative to calling 911 police for someone who's in crisis. What does that mean? It can mean anything to anyone. So our mission statement is unique because we let the consumer, the people that we serve, define their crisis and define where they are. That's a little different from the normal model where somebody gets assessed and they're told what's wrong with them and they're told how to fix it. So we give a lot of autonomy to the people that we serve. And therefore, our biggest goal in assessing and intervention is safety. To get someone to a safe place, that could be our facility, that could be a friend's home, a shelter, a hospital. And if they're in a safe place, they're not as likely to be on the street in a vulnerable position, with the opportunity of being harmed. So I've been with Resolve 10 years, and in this field many, many years, over 30. I've been in these types of discussions before, unfortunately, and it's very important issue to me and to us at our center. I'm just going to talk quickly about what we have at Resolve. We have 3 departments. The first department is a phone center. You can call anytime, day or night. There's no charge, there's no limit to using our service. And you can call if you're depressed, upset, if you're calling for a friend, a family member, you want somebody to be checked out, you want somebody to be contacted. You can come to our facility again and be assessed and receive a safe place to be, get resources or linked to treatment. And the third department is probably the most relevant to tonight's discussion is our mobile crisis team. It's a team of 2 clinicians, 2 trained, experienced clinicians that come out into the community. They're plain clothes and plain vehicle. All we have is this tag, which we can even hide. We don't try to draw attention to people to put them in harm's way. We do work with the police and 911 in very isolated situations and instances. I can go over those in the question and answer section. But I think we're more advocates for the consumers and people that work within the community. We've been around a long time, and we take our work very seriously. Again, safety is our main goal and our main purpose in working with people. And thank you for having me here to join the discussion.
Thanks so much.
Hi everyone, thank you for.
Laura, can you? I think people on Facebook Live and Instagram might have they're having trouble. So if you use the mic, I think that might be better.
Do you think it's working? Can you hear the mic on?
Mic's not getting loud.
Mic is not. Is this better? Okay. Thank you for acknowledging that. My name is Laura Kagowski, and pronouns are she, her. I work for the City of Pittsburgh's Office of Community Health and Safety. I've worked for the city for 5.5 years. I think that the needs that will be discussed in this room are obviously long-standing and predate my time in the city. Certainly predate the inception of this office. I think I'm a context person. It always helps me if I start from understanding how things are now, and I'll at least explain from our perspective what we see as we try to embark on what we're doing. Allegheny County has 130 municipalities. It's a tremendously complex landscape. I don't envy people who have to navigate all of those municipalities. Councilperson Gross and I represent one of those municipalities. The city of Pittsburgh has 303,000 people. It's about a quarter of the 1.2 million people in the county. Traditionally, the city has, as you know, had services like public works, fire, police, EMS, planning, zoning. Over many years, and especially in the last few years, I think what the city has acknowledged as our residents have advocated is that we need to do more. When I think about someone calling 911 for an emergency, if it's a fire, flood, landslide, you're going to get fire as your primary responder. If it's a medical issue, this is a generalization, so maybe I'll make this as simple as possible. If it's a medical emergency, you're going to get EMS as your primary response. If it's anything else, you're going to get police. That means, your neighbor's music is too loud. You think you saw someone steal something. You feel unsafe because someone's coming to your house. The breadth of the response that police have is enormous, and it's very hard to characterize. We see our partners in the county taking about a $1.2 billion budget for human services. So when we think of drug and alcohol, we think of mental health, behavioral health, crisis response. We think about intellectual disability services, aging services. All of those services are primarily funded and contracted with the city. And yet, when you need an immediate response, they're funded at the county, but when you need an immediate response, you're calling the city, you're calling 911, and it's dispatching from the county to the city. So you can see the disconnect, right? We have this limited scope of professionals covering what feels like a limitless scope of responses and responsibilities. what the Community Health and Safety Office is endeavoring to do with partnerships, with pressure sometimes, and with contracts, is to figure out how we build out more of a continuum of response. So that if a young person will eat their broccoli, that's a real call, right, that police have gotten. If a young person will eat their broccoli and mom's really tired, we don't send police because, my goodness, they don't want to go either. We have just created a circumstance that is rife for escalation and harm. So we endeavor to do that. Now we do that though with the recognition that it hasn't historically been our primary responsibility. So we're learning. We have hired social workers. And what we hope they can do is that incremental piece where rather than sending out an officer, we send out an officer and a social worker. And then we have a contract with our partners, Allegheny Health Network, to do what I think is really among the most difficult things for us to understand and navigate, which is to alternatively respond. They're not here tonight, so I want to allow them in a future state to give you more insight there. I always hate when people try to promote their expertise about something that they don't have expertise in. That's something that's been really critical to the development of our office, is that we elevate experts. We elevate the people who are specifically knowledgeable about something. We don't think that because we got a soundbite, we at all know what we're doing. So we try to build that response, but we also think about upstream interventions. So why are we always waiting until 911 or 980 is called? There's a lot of things that occur prior to that. How do we have referrals into programs to support people? What are meaningful ways that we can support community members to help one another? I think that's, our entire ethos as a society, that we care about each other. I hope we do. I know you all do. And so what does it look like to re-empower community, or to continue to empower community to help one another? And then to bring in the experts at appropriate times, we call it right responder. And then I think also equally importantly is how do we follow up with people? One of the things we see a lot on the public safety side, and our office is newly in public safety, is that there are a lot of recurrent calls. And so it's not one call, it's not two calls, sometimes it's 30 calls, and you can all imagine how those situations escalate and become very harmful to all people involved. So if we've had one call, that needs to be enough. We need to then have people who are appropriate, supportive, and promoting the agency of that individual, work with that person, their family, their community, to figure out how we preempt future engagements with public safety. So in the end, it's not only focusing on our residents and the well-being of our communities, it also focuses on helping our first responders to do the jobs that they were hired to do, and not to give them this limitless role, which I think we all know burns everybody out and really does expose our community and our first responders to a lot of harm and a lot of risk. So I'll be happy. It's a very long introduction to Julian, but I'll be very happy to speak with you all during the course of this, and thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Really, this is great. Thank you, Laura. Hi, my name's Deb Gross, and I'm with Pittsburgh City Council. I represent Bloomfield, as well as 6 other neighborhoods. And I'm really glad I just followed Laura. I really like the way, Laura, you described the framework for us, but it's also really important that we have someone from the actual administration in a strong mayor city like we are, who's actually the implementers and the people who do this work every day. Whereas the council's role is legislative and budgetary. And of course, we also go to a lot of the community meetings and take a lot of the calls from our community members. But it's really, when we get your call, very often it's been Laura that I've called. So I just want to give you a shout out. There were several times, even I think we might have not even created the Office of Community Health and Safety priority for the city. And we had 2 incidents. We had some people in crisis in Shula Park. And there had been some incidents, and when we said, okay, how do we get the right people who are experts and who can respond to kind of all the different community concerns, as well as make sure that the people who are living in the park are cared for and get the right resources to come work. And this was even before we created that office. And when we had people who needed to be rehomed, who were at a very low level of public assistance. I think they were living on something like $300 a month on Liberty Avenue, and the building had sold. It's the White Widow building now, but there had been people living upstairs, and the landlord was thankfully trying to find each of the people living there a home, and had run into a wall and was just stuck, couldn't really find a place for the remaining 3 or 4 people. We called Laura, and we were worked with my staff to find the family members or to find new places where those people could live while that building was changing ownership and being renovated. But then we were able to work on these issues. We realized, as I think Laura so aptly framed, that we didn't have anything in our organizational chart to do this work, right? And so we felt like pulling someone who had the energy and expertise in the mayor's office to do this frontline work. And so, council has been working to kind of allocate the funds to do more of this work. Again, I think it's really important, and you'll hear me, and probably Laura too, say it multiple times tonight, the county has the $1.2 billion annually. We don't even pay for it. That's federal money. Right? So the federal government each year is the county government that I have no vote on. We all can just vote, for our county council representatives or county executive. But they get this big pop. Come on up. Speaking of our county representative, they get the big money. The city government has the first responders, right? And so this is exactly stuff. So thank you to the organizers for having us here, and that we're all really just struggling and to try to figure out how to do this differently. So we have, we can allocate the funds, and we have allocated millions of dollars, both of your money and of the federal ARPA relief money that we got, which I think is really appropriate. And then how do we do the things that prevent the future crises and try to support our residents is also something that council is really engaged in. Again, we have, what are the tools? How do we engage with this work? We do public hearings, we do post agendas, we do policy research in our offices. We work with people who are knowledgeable in either the neighborhood level or in the regional or city level in special subject area experts to try to figure out what's within what are we allowed to do as a city and how do we find money to do better. So that's our basic scope. Thank you.
Sarah, do you want to go and we'll get settled? This one. Yeah.
Good evening. I am Sarah Knuckles from Windsor. No? I'm Sarah Knuckles. I am from Gwen's Girls, but I am not here to talk today about Gwen's Girls. We have a brand new initiative, which is a partnership with DHS, and it is Caring Connections for Youth. It is a pre-arrest, pre-diversion program throughout Allegheny County. We serve any youth under the age of 18. Again, that's any youth under the age of 18 throughout Allegheny County. We just launched, we did a soft launch back in October. We did an official launch the 21st of December. So we are up and running live. It is a centralized intake call center through 211, which is United Way's 24-hour hotline. We are not a crisis response program such as Resolve, but again, we are a pre-arrest and pre-diversion program. So what does that mean? So what we are asking is that, and this came about because of a huge disproportionate amount of Black and brown youth who are put in the system, criminalized, and take a trajectory into our system and stay in our system. Starting out with things that don't necessarily need police involvement, right? So things like truancy, things like parent-child conflict, things like low-level drug possession, things like low-level community violence, things like disorderly conduct, which is kind of this word that they use for anything in school, like pretty much anything. If you don't want to give up your cell phone, if you aren't following rules, if you talk out of class, if you go to the bathroom during a time that's not designated for that, they put you into this whole disorderly conduct caveat. So these are things that do not necessarily need or warrant police involvement. So what we would prefer is that school systems, school administration, teachers, community, parents, and also youth serving agencies and programs and entities utilize that 211, which is option number 3, to connect to caring connections. And then what do we do? So we have community-based resource coordinators. We also have a special navigator that is housed within both and embedded in both our program as well as United Way. So they're a Wentworth employee and also a United Way employee. They are a specialized navigator. They are in the United Way system, so they can link up to any of this stuff, which if anyone has not heard about 211 or used 211, it is a wealth of resource information. So that's also very important. But our special navigator looks at what is this family involved in previously, what's worked, what has not, what kind of resources are out there to address the problem. And our community-based resource coordinators, which we have a team of them, and they're housed in different communities. They are very, very boots on the ground, grassroots in those communities. They're involved in the school, they're attending PTA meetings, they're attending resource fairs in the community, they're attending different community meetings in those communities. They're attending anti-violence. We're very embedded in the anti-violence and violence prevention work that's going on in Allegheny County. So they're attending those meetings. They're very visible in the communities, very visible with families and kids, and also with the resources that are in this community. So that would be anything from like community centers to after-school programs to sports and recreation. Those community-based resource coordinators will sit down and work with the family, very similar to what Mark said. You know, we don't do that traditional needs-based assessment where we're telling the family what's wrong and what they need to fix, and we're the answer, right? We do a very shared power, a very with you, side by side, looking at what are the things your family needs, because we find very often that the families know exactly what they need. They just don't know what it's called. They just don't know what agency provides that, and they struggle with, when I call that, what do I ask for? What's the language, what's the words that I use to get this, right, to get this need met? So we work with them side by side to look at what does your family need? What are the kind of resources that if we could give you a magic wand, what does that look like? And then we find those resources. Because Allegheny County, we're pretty fortunate. We're rich in resources. There's just a lot of work that happens in silos, right? And again, people in the community don't know what those are. So really trying to connect. That's why we're called Caring Connections, because we are that caring person, right? But also we're the connectors. So what we're trying to do is connect this huge network of resources, these partnerships in our communities. We're not just looking at traditional resources, but we're also looking at very non-traditional, very grassroots, very boots on the ground stuff that goes on in our community. Things like coaches, right, who do great work. We have lots of grandparents. We have lots of folks that have lived experience, that live in our communities, that are out there doing informal mentoring. We have a lot of people who are doing anti-violence and violence prevention work and not connected with an agency, but we're also partnering with those folks who, again, grassroots, non-traditional, and this huge network of partners that now we can help connect and connect those dots, connect those resources, and connect those families and those youth. So again, 911 doesn't have to get involved. We can stop that trajectory. We can stop the violence that may escalate. We can stop the frustrated parents who may abuse, or the frustrated teens who may rebel. We can stop that before it even gets to a point where it hits that trajectory. So again, that's a centralized 211. Option number 3, we also have text now through, it is text CC, the number 4, youth, to 898-211. I'm sorry, I'm doing some flyers around here. So it's texting to 898-211, and you text CC, the number 4, youth. You can even do CC4Y. That'll also work. We have a chat now feature on both our website as well as the United Way website. Our website, we have gwensgirls.org or cc4youth.org. And you can also get more information on either of those websites about the program. Okay?
Thank you. And then, yeah, to wrap up our panel speakers list, we'd love to hear what's going on at the county level.
So first, thank you for inviting me, and I'm sorry for my tardiness. It was running like 10 minutes behind until I took a wrong turn and got added 5 more minutes. So, but I'm here now, so thank you. So the county, so for me, when we're talking about answers to 211 or 911, the first thing I would say is thank you for having this conversation, because 911 or police are not necessarily safe for all populations, and they make all populations feel safe. So, communicating, alternatives to that is definitely needed. And so for us at the county, I think DHS is a huge partnership or a huge agency under the county that we could leverage to do a lot of that work. With exploring alternatives, even with the 211 that Sarah was just talking about, and how we can make those partnerships to train community partners, like she was talking about, in mental health, first aid, and being first responders, if you will, to some of these issues or things that don't necessarily need a police response. And I know in my community, one of the challenges is that these agencies don't necessarily work 24 hours a day. So a lot of times these issues may happen in off-peak hours, if you will. And having that community-trained person is a lot better, because then you have somebody responding and you're not depending on an agency. So I know that we would love to explore that more at the county, and how to actually compensate these people, because that's the big thing for me, is that you see a lot of these folks doing this work, but are we compensating them for the work that they're doing in the community with helping to interrupt some of this violence and even, responding in things that are not necessarily violence, like mental health crises, right? So I think for us, DHS, and even the health department can provide some of those answers for us as well. And I think as we move into new leadership at the health department, that is something that we can definitely explore, and seeing how that could be connected more to the community and being a response. Because I would love to do something like a cahoots, where we're having some training partnerships with mental health agencies. But the other challenge is that mental health agencies and mental health workers are in a shortage at this moment. So even with some of those partnerships, how do we, navigate that? So yeah, those are my initial thoughts. I didn't want to try not to repeat what anybody else said, but I don't also know what anybody else said.
Very good. Well, that's a good question. So before we get into our questions for the panelists, if you have questions, there's your little notes, and Heather will grab them. But I have a couple questions for our audience. So I was hoping if you feel comfortable, raise your hand if by you. Wondering if folks in our audience, have you ever called the police? Now, and then, is there a time you regret calling the police? Yeah, so just kind of wanted to, see, right, these are experiences that while, maybe we have had benefits from calling the police in the past. I had my car stolen, got it back within, an hour after I called the police, right? But there have also been, negative experiences that, many people have experienced as well. So just wanted to check in on where everybody stood there.
So we're ready for some questions. So we're going to ask the panel some questions. Like Judge said, you have some questions. We'll also, pause for a second so you can raise those sticky notes up and have a look around and collect some notes as well. But to start, the first question is for Deb, Claire, or Laura. So you guys can decide which. So,
Or you can all.
or you can all answer, right? And this is a question that I find really interesting. What does defunding the police mean to you?
That is a campaign that I definitely worked on counselor. And maybe we should talk about language because defunding makes us a little uncomfortable. But if we are talking about what it actually means, it is taking funds away from the police to actually resource other responses, such as mental health responses and other substance use disorder responses or unhoused population responses, right? And so I think it needs to be like investing in some of those community resources and responses that kind of were absent. Because we had like community centers and things when I was a kid, but where did those things go? So I think when we talk about defunding police, it's not like, we're never going to see police and people feel, I think people confuse defunding with abolition, because defunding does not mean taking the police budget to a zero balance, it just means taking some funds and reallocating those for some of what we feel would be better responses for some of the things that we receive now from calls for.
Yeah.
I think there was definitely that moment when we heard a lot of public comment that was, I think everybody was imagining the extremes of this issue. And I'd like to remind people that I got 3,500 emails from you all about the fundraising. 3,500. And a lot of it were from my district, right? And we searched because some of you signed your zip code or your street address or said what neighborhood you were in. So I know that was something that my constituents were supportive of. And I did actually put on an amendment on the table in 2020 for the 2021 budget in December when we were at our final amendments to reduce our $115 million proposal budget for police salaries by $900,000 to try to put more money into the things that those emails said. Things like affordable housing or stronger neighborhood investments or the kinds of activities that you mentioned like Parks and Rec. There was money there for, and I would have applied that $900,000 to more positions in city planning because having gone through affordable housing, zoning work, I realized part of the problem is we don't have enough people in city planning to do those kind of changes. And then some people in permits, licenses, and inspections. Also, if you're trying to do almost anything, you end up having to interact with our regulators and our permit people. And then thirdly, the Parks and Rec. And I didn't get a single council member support. In fact, I didn't even get a second on the motion list. So when I motioned to amend and to have a discussion in that city council session for that amendment, my colleagues wouldn't give me a second, so the motion died. So I did not put that amendment through in 2020. And it wouldn't have made a difference to the police staff, I don't think. Again, the proposal that here was for $115 million.
And we did a lot of work in 2020. We did a lot of public hearings. We did a lot of digging. We had a lot of conversations with constituents. And my staff put together a table that we still have outsourced somewhere in an open Google Doc, and I don't know where that would be. I don't know if it's linked on our city council page. That also looked through all the other pages of the budget. The budget's a pretty big operating budget. And so, like in the law department, it's where they pay out the court funds, right? If there's a warrant, because you've got a claim against the police. And some of them are significant. So that is not in the police budget, that's in the law department. You know, those fancy cars and the vans that we saw during the protests, those are not in the police budget page. Those are even off book entirely the equipment leasing authority. We tracked down some of those expenditures, et cetera, et cetera. And so we, in that year, it really wasn't we haven't done the work each of the years, because you could just kind of, it's proportional, it's been the same. So like that year was 115 million, and I think the total budget, if you added up all the things in all the other departments, was really around 175 million. And that year, our state budget was around 600 and some million, right? Like 610 million maybe. And so that's big, you know, that's more than 15%, you're approaching 20% if you add in all the other things, for sure. Maybe minimum, beyond. And again, we have a pretty big city budget. It's up to 660 million, I think, this year. And so the one thing that I think can make you feel maybe even a little bit heard is that police budget hasn't gotten any bigger as the city budget. So it has been relatively decreased. Yeah, so the city budget this year is around 670 million, and the police budget is actually slightly down. It's like only about like 118 million. So I think we need to are kind of like just taking a pause and looking at kind of where else we did add some 200 or 300 positions into the city budget and things like DPW and some of these other departments that they're being asked for. And I'm happy to see, but I'll leave you with this. Those lifeguards, those rec centers, those farmers markets, that mascot day at Shanley Oval that we just had, Parks and Rec's budget is only 1% of this budget. 1%. And that makes me sad.
So I'll echo Councilperson Gross, and I'm happy I got to go after others on this question. It gave me a little bit of time to think about the response. I think, to Councilperson Bennett's, can you hear me? Yep, thank you. To Councilperson Bennett's point, fair compensation, people in our community is paramount, right? As a sort of, I think, mission of our office, we try to be very objective about what well-being looks like. I look at, our paramedics right now, they're being held over a lot, which means they're working double shifts. The same is true of our police. That is not a recipe, I think, for wellness. I think where we need to focus is certainly on innovation, on change, on advocacy. But I do think that there's some part of that defund question that starts pitting us all against each other. And I have not found that to be productive, because I think Councilperson Gross made a great point about public works staff. We need to pay them well. Those are hard jobs. We need to have enough inspectors. We need to have enough people doing the job. But I think we get really caught up in fighting over who's going to get this money, rather than articulating what do we actually need in our communities as a continuum of response. What do we need to preempt? As Sarah's talking about the Public Works Girls program, the Caring Connections program. I think until such time that we can actually articulate what does that mean, it's very difficult, because hypothetically, I think it's 120 million or something is the police budget. Let's say we pulled, I'm trying to do math here really quickly, that's 20% would be $24 million. What we would lose in capacity for a rapid response from officers, we could not build back in a response paradigm. We cannot, to Liv's point, we can't hire people for some of these jobs. That'll be a very, very difficult time because they're really difficult. Mental health jobs are extraordinarily difficult. Until such time that we're paying people well, we're supporting them, we're going to have a very difficult time recruiting. We need pipelines for recruitment. We need to recruit people that look like the communities they serve. We get a lot of people who are coming from communities that are very far outside the communities they serve, and I credit people for that commitment. At the same time, I think we're failing to invest in our own community members to do that work. So I think the defund question is a little bit of a lightning rod, because I think we need to ask, what do we need? And it's a more question. Why are we disinvesting one department to build up a, as of yet, ill-defined department? Why aren't we laying out a map that includes the community, includes the participants who would be centrally utilizing those services? I think that's always the thing that we as, I don't mean city government, I mean generally as a society fail to do, which is to know what the people who would be benefiting or harmed by those services want and need. We need to figure that out before we have the conversation of defunding, because I think it gets us into arguments with one another rather than generative discussion about what's needed. And I think, we have really worked to think about what does a continuum look like? How do we have sufficient capacity? As long as we don't have people who can respond right away, and I think this is something that Liv and Sarah and others said, as long as we don't have that, people will keep calling 911. And we will keep being able to justify hiring more people to do this very immediate thing we need, rather than stepping back and saying, holy crap, we've failed to recognize what it means to build. We need coordination. There are going to be times where Sarah's staff are the right staff, where, Mark's staff are the right staff, we need to coordinate. We need that coordination to be very tight. And we need a commitment, because I think most importantly, there's going to be a time where we see a flaw, we see a failure, and our nature is to retract and say, let's go back to the thing we're used to doing. Let's go back to the thing that's really comfortable for us. This is going to be an extraordinarily uncomfortable time. We're used to getting, Grubhub, and we're mad when the Grubhub takes, I don't get Grubhub, so this is no knock on Grubhub, but we're mad when it takes 45 minutes. Because we want our sandwich right now because we're really hungry. We're going to have to start getting used to the fact that, if someone is not in a danger, that response may take some time. There are ways we can support our community members until such time that Mark or the Roots team or our partners are able to be there. And that's discomfort for all of us, because that's why we need jerks to the police. That's why we need jerks to 911. We can't blame the police for responding to the 911 calls. We've created that situation. So we've created the situation, and then we're mad at them for doing the thing that we've kind of failed society to address more robustly.
I'd like that. So, I don't want to, we don't need to stay only on this topic, but we did have a lot of these discussions at council about what is the appropriate level of budgeting and staffing. We are definitely concerned that not only our police, but that other departments at the city are earning enough money. We were just basically underpaying everyone, right? We've seen you not have the services that you were looking for, from lifeguards to your garbage pickup. I used to always say, thank God for environmental services. I never get a call thinking about garbage pickup. But with COVID and with just the stress of today, there might be some staffing issues, and I did get some calls from people about off-schedule garbage pickup. But I want to, so specifically on the police department, this is ongoing work, and you can see some of the discussions, especially in our budget hearings. Every December, late November, we have every single department come to City Council and tell us what they need the money for, right? How much pay do they need? Where are they trying to hire? How are they allocating? What does their individual department organizational chart look like? And again, thanks to my staff, we did some comparisons to benchmark cities. And we started doing the work in 2020. And if you compare us to the cities that are like us, like Baltimore, like St. Louis, like Minneapolis, like even Denver, there's the kind of Pittsburgh Quarterly, said about 14 cities that we have been comparing ourselves to for quite a while. We pulled up those cities and looked at police staffing, and it varies dramatically per capita. So, the number of police per like 10,000 people in Pittsburgh is around 28. And in some cities it's much lower than that, it's 20. And then in St. Louis and Baltimore, I think it's much higher. But another metric that I thought was really valuable was to not just look at the total employees in each police department, but then break down that number by how many of them are civilians and how many of them are officers. Because the officers process in training, they're members of the police union, the Criminal Order Police, and there's a different contract rules around those officers. And in some of our benchmark cities, there is a really big portion of the police department budget and positions in the organizational chart that are civilians. And in Pittsburgh, there's almost none. So we're almost entirely officers. So there's room, I think, for us to really those are good questions. And I think that we all have like a lot of learning to do and discussing to really look at, even if we have the exact same budget, really who are we paying to do the work? And who we need to respond, for example, to traffic orders, to the community event, right? When you're going to go from the city of how many police officers you need for each of the stop horses that closes down your community event, right? Does that need to be a full-fledged officer? Right? I mean, I know I have community events that don't exist anymore because of the billing from the city for the number of police officers required for their Sunday morning fundraising walk. And that's not okay. And not just myself, but council members have been saying this for quite a while. I'm still kind of working that out and who assigns what people to what tasks. So there's in each of these topics, you really go down. And that's policy work, right? And that's why we're really grateful that you're here and spending your evening paying attention to these questions. Because honestly, sometimes the solutions really do come from our community members. So that's a great question.
So I think we're all curious, right now with the programs that exist currently, what are options for people if there, is an incident where they don't necessarily need the police to come, but they do need, an emergency response or resolve. So I think Sarah, you gave us, really clear instructions if it's a youth, right? Like how to connect and what services can be available and that they're available all the time. We'd love to hear more about, OCHS, you said there's social workers on staff, right? Is there a way for people to, direct their calls to 911 or specifically request it to make sure you get someone like that coming out, or to get, an EMS professional instead of the cops coming out to respond to the call? And then also, Mark, would love to hear from you, kind of specifically walking through, what situations are appropriate to call resolve through, and walk us through, the step-by-step of how that response works and what you kind of, see as the resolution of a call to resolve.
So I can just say real quickly, again, we are not a crisis response center. We are a 24-hour centralized intake call center. You can call and utilize 24 hours. You will be immediately connected to a navigator who can start the process of connecting you to some of those resources, and then first thing the next business morning, a resource coordinator will be in contact with that family or that youth. I can say one of the things that we recently got a call from was a little bit of a disruptance at Target, right over in East Liberty, that the Target, a security guard or police officer did not feel it really needed to go to 911. So 911 did get involved, but then we also got involved. There were no arrests made, and we were able to connect some of those youth to different programs. So that's an example.
So when you think about resolve, for those of you that have heard of us, pre-pandemic numbers, we always have to use those, right? We could take up to 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 phone calls a month. We could do 1,200 mobile calls in a month, meaning we would get out to see someone, provide an intervention, provide some resolution in safety, and so we're working our way back to those numbers, and we've even been told that we are going to add some of our crisis teams. We're going to be putting teams directly into police departments. I'm going to be taking the lead on that. It's going to be a crisis clinician and a peer specialist, meaning someone who's in or has been in mental health treatment themselves. And the peer movement, if you know anything about it, it's national. We're using peer supports in all of our departments, in all of mental health and social services, and they've been a wonderful addition. So what we think of, again, a crisis is something that's unique to everybody. And if you have we'll go out in the morning to get somebody up to go to school that won't get up to go to school, won't go to bed at night. We get calls from schools. We get calls for older parents from adult children. We get calls for people that need to go to the hospital. If you're not sure where it fits with us. We will respond and we'll figure it out. And we do a lot with linking people to services that are being discussed here. But I can't emphasize enough that there is no clear reason not to call us. You can call us anytime. And the way it looks is you call into the phone center, the call should be answered quickly. And then you can describe your situation, and sometimes that's resolved over the phone. Sometimes it's resolved with a phone call by us. Would you check in on my mom? I haven't heard from her. She's in the beginning of Alzheimer's, and I'm worried about her. Could you call and check on her? And we make a call, and we find out, well, things maybe aren't going so well, so we get a team over there, and we do a face-to-face wellness check. So, and obviously if someone needs assistance, our model, again, in looking at other crisis centers throughout the country, some of them will tell you that a crisis team will respond within 24 to 48 hours. We are angry right now, and I say angry that it takes us sometimes 2 and 3 hours because of our staffing, because sometimes we have only a couple of teams to cover those 1.2 million people. So we want to get back to where we can respond to these calls, and we know instinctively, by experience, by training, when to involve law enforcement and when not to. And it's purely for a safety or a de-escalation, provide a safe space so we can go in and do the work that we need to do. And I think if you look at, I can't think of, most of the police departments that we deal with are glad to call us and to see us. And some of our referrals, many of our referrals come from the departments. They get to a point and they go, it's 11-year-old and he's not going to go to sleep. What are they going to do? Are they going to use force? No, so they'll tell the parent, call resolve, get a team out there, see if they can de-escalate and get him to sleep, and so forth. I'm not minimizing or trivializing any of this. I think that, once we're back to where the level we want to be at, our model is a good model to use. And there's plenty of room. We were talking before the start of the event tonight. There's plenty of room for as many agencies as want to be involved. There's plenty of business out there. We don't have to have it all. But I think, I agree with some of what the panel has said, and though they work in the budget and a lot of higher level than I do. But I really think that right now, immediately, if you need to call someone, if you called right now, we will see you tonight. If it takes a while, we will be there tonight. And so, it can be reassuring to know that you have a place to call. But we have work we have to do. We need help with our budget. We need to pay our people better, and all the things have been discussed here. But right now, immediately, you can call us and we will respond.
Okay, so context. So I think as we talk about who does what, and Mark even said there's room for a lot of partners in this work. The dispatch, when you call 911, the person who answers your call, with a few exceptions, there's a couple of municipalities, this may be a bit different, but the vast majority of municipalities in Allegheny County go through the county's dispatch system. So you have a call taker, and they assess your situation with you. They are then responsible with their teams to dispatch the appropriate responders. So, my house is on fire. we need firefighters, and we probably need paramedics, and we may need police to manage traffic, right? And then they have to do that for every municipal entity, right? So Penn Hills has a different police department, different fire EMS than the city of Pittsburgh. There's something like, and forgive me because I wouldn't quote this number, but like 200 entities of which the city has fire, police, EMS, but something like 200 entities that are dispatched. And actually we also have, I think, like Public Works that goes out and PWSA too. So then when we start saying, well, let's add more, we're looking at people who are already dispatching 200 entities across the county, which kind of reminds me of the what do they call it, the airline system, you know, all these like complex air traffic controls. So they're doing all of that. So when we talk about who responds to a call, the first thing is, what do you say to that call taker? So are you telling someone that call taker, someone's pointing a gun at me, or, you know, I feel unsafe because you're going to get police? Is someone not breathing? In the city of Pittsburgh, often when someone's not breathing, we send all 3 bureaus. Now, I think we can understand why we wouldn't want that to be the case, and as we err on the side of safety, we think, who can get there first to restart that breathing? Our paramedics, our police, who are EMTs, and our firefighters all go. Let's see who can get there first. Now, when we think someone's not breathing because they experienced an overdose, okay, well now we just send law enforcement to respond to a person who's actively using drugs, and I think we can all acknowledge how that does not seem like the trauma-informed response that we would want. So it's the call you make, and then there are very specific protocols delineated at, you know, either at the state, the federal level, or that are locally determined by the directors of different departments across the county. So the city doesn't have a ton of agency over who responds to this. Now that doesn't mean we couldn't. And I think those are the advocacy discussions we have to start having, which is we build the capacity to have other responders, and then we demand that those responders be part of the dispatch system. Boy, that is not going fast enough at all. And we need it yesterday, and I think there's been tremendous neglect of this challenge until it reaches a pitch, until it reaches national attention, and then all of a sudden we say, why isn't this happening? And we're all arguing, and it's because we worked with, we met with the department in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They've had social workers working with their police department for 50 years. 50 years. Cahoots, which Liv mentioned, was established 30 years ago. We're actually just really behind, and I think part of it is because it's so, I'm not going to say intentionally complex, it's all so complex, it's hard to even know where your pressure points and your points of advocacy are to change things. It's exhausting. I'm exhausted telling you all this, so I imagine you're exhausted hearing it. But actually there's so much that needs to change. That political will has to be there, and I think it is. I think we have that leadership in our region. But it also needs to be, as I said, coordinated across different entities at different levels. And there has to be commitment, because it is going to suck sometimes. And if we quit because it sucks, we're going to get stuck where we are, which is, I think, what we've seen over the last decades. And then we point to other people, and it feels like gaslighting. Like, how dare you respond to that? Well, who else do we have? So I think, Jody, the question is right. I think it's actually about identifying when we want and need different responders, what our expectation is of the responsiveness. You know, if someone's experiencing overdose, we can't wait 24 hours, right? If someone is loud in public and making us kind of uncomfortable, but they're not blocking any traffic and they're not hurting anyone, then we need to check our own expectations of the people around us. Is it harming us that that person is behaving in a way that's different? I don't know. I don't think so. It might make us uncomfortable, but I think that's where we all as a community can rethink when we're calling. Because what do we expect? An officer's going to show up and tell that person to be quiet? That didn't get us there, right? So, anyways, I don't know if that answers the question. I think it's always so much deeper, and I think that people who show up to meetings like this want to do the deep work. You want to work at it, and I think that's why we're all here too.
Add something to that. So I only wanted to add that when we're talking about our dispatch 911 center, we're talking about another group of people that are being asked to work doubles and 16-hour days. So we recently, county council recently visited that center and talked to those folks and trying to figure out strategies to bring more staffing in because they definitely need that. And so that is another piece to the puzzle or challenge, if you will, when you're talking about adding another, response or any other responsibility to that group of folks when they're already stretched and strained. So just wanted to add that because that is another piece of this puzzle.
And county employees are probably vastly underpaid.
Absolutely, absolutely.
They almost come up straight.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the next question. So this one is for anyone that would like to answer as well. It seems like there's a large disparity between health services available. So there seems to be a little bit of disparity, or a lot of disparity between health services and like we were saying, to the point that it would cost somebody for assistance. So can the panel speak to what health services or mental services or other resources are we missing out on and contribute to the community to get us to the preventative state before we would have to call these secondary services or correctional services?
So this is not necessarily answering that question, but this is important to add into this conversation. One of the things that is very frustrating is that there is a huge lack of Black and brown providers, right? At Glen's Girls, we say nothing for us without us. Our youth need to have, our communities need to have, and our families need to have mental health providers who look like them, who have lived experience, who have similar racial trauma, similar experiences. And that is hugely missing here in the city of Pittsburgh as well as Allegheny County. And then to add to that, when you are a private provider, you have to jump through a whole lot of hoops to get medical assistance to pay. So the few providers that we do have that are Black and brown do not accept medical assistance. Or a large amount of them do not accept medical assistance, which makes the problem even larger. So I think that is something that we really, really have to work on. One, we need to help them through that process to get that licensing, or whatever it might be that they need. And then we need to really find a way to encourage, Black and brown high school students and entering into college, entering into graduate school, to really go that direction and to help them go in that direction. Because again, our youth and families need to see people who look like that.
Yeah, to add to that, I would love to see partnerships with our universities to kind of incentivize or even pay for the tuition of anyone willing to, any person of color willing to enter that field, because like you said, there is a huge shortage. And I also would say, I was recently trained to be a community health worker, and part of that training is taking mental health first aid. And that does not require any medical degree or anything like that. So while you're not, you might not be diagnosing, you're not in a position to diagnose or, say this person is or whatever, you have the skills, you can equip your community and people that are very engaged in the community to be able to respond until you can get that level of response that you really need. So I would be one thing that I would, say that would be a wonderful addition to being able to help folks in crises.
I'm just going to comment on, as I said I would, to the fact that we've got the kind of
crisis, and also community support organizations, really are county-wide providers. But sometimes we're looking for a stronger network for city residents. So we feel, I think, sometimes the stress of having to share the resource providers with the whole county. And so it's one of the reasons why we now have, I think we're 6 social workers, right? And again, it's not our core jurisdiction as a city. You know, for a place like Philadelphia or other places around the county or the country, the city is the county and the county is the city, but that's not true here. So there's a whole separate county government. Again, I can't allocate those funds, right? And so it's a struggle. So we've diverted some of your tax dollars or property tax dollars and other kind of revenue that we have as a city, because we don't have any of those 1.2 billion that the feds allocate to the region. But we've kind of siphoned out, it could be done to something else, to creating our own Office of Community Health and Safety with people with those degrees. And that's very good to do that passport work. It's not reaching our residents, doing everything from this diversion work, for, you know, having peers right along with our first responders, because we have a responsibility for first responders, right? The EMS is not county EMS. The police responders are not county police. They're city police, city EMS. Fire response, like keep on 911. You're not getting a county employee putting out the fire at your house. It's a city employee. So, you know, we're trying to patch those together. And so what can we do? So one of the things I'm working on now, I'm coordinating with the administration, I'm going to put some legislation forward soon, is I've been getting requests from the small businesses in my district. And those workers who are not police, fire, EMS, but they're baristas or coffee shop workers. And yet they're having to respond, right? And so, and we've had some scary things happen to people, and we know that the workers that are organizing the union for Starbucks, this is one of their top requests to their corporate employers, and so we're looking to see if we can put a kind of training program. I didn't know about the first aid provider, mental health providers, so thank you for that. Lorraine might have already done, and we'll be working on kind of what training as members of the public they can get, we can provide that to them so that people are getting a better response and getting people to the help that they need, either homelessness response and our camp training or any other mentally. So we do what we can, and then both resources but also legal jurisdiction.
I will say, I don't know if this was said, but yes, in Allegheny County, there are 130 different municipalities, cities, boroughs, townships, and so the county does have to allocate funds, you know, equitably, hopefully, to all of those different municipalities. While the county does not have a response, the county does not respond to police incidents in the city of Pittsburgh, we do have a county police that does respond to incidents in some of the smaller municipalities that don't have police, such as East Pittsburgh, and they do investigate all homicides that are around the county outside of the city of Pittsburgh, just for context.
If the police do become involved in an emergency situation, whether, you know, the caller wanted them there or not, do any of you have recommendations about what, you know, people can do to keep them and other people in the situation safe, and, you know, prevent, you know, a violent interaction with the police or, you know, the various different things that can, you know, happen in a negative way? I'm just kind of looking for, you know, practical answers, kind of more so than, you know, respect. You know, respect the officers and do what they say. But if there's any other, you know, suggestions outside of that latitude.
Can I give a suggestion for these in this situation? As a parent, I call because I feel like I might, I know.
Yeah, no,
I don't
please.
mean to be disrespectful, but like, it just happens to me a lot now. The minute I call, we are in a mental health crisis. It is the first thing that I say. And I'm very, very clear about it. Because last thing I want to prevent guns in my home, and I prevent guns in my home all the time. And I have to say it repeatedly. So much so that they know.
So I'm going to answer this question very carefully. I think that the onus should not be on call. The onus should not be on the family leading for the community. The onus is on the office who responds. But I do think what you said is a hugely helpful suggestion. I also think it's important to add, if there are weapons in the house, but those weapons are locked up, that kind of thing. I also, I'm a mother with a special needs child, mental health. I always, make sure that they know. I also have a daughter who has very, very significant trauma when it comes to police. So I always add that she is terrified of police. She will respond in a negative way. She is very afraid. So I make sure to add that as well. But again, I think the onus is on giving our officers proper training and weeding out the officers that just have no business in our community who are more harmful than helpful. And just, again, protect and serve.
If I could speak to that, I think that's a great idea, Amanda. And I think that, one of the things that we do at Resolve, our medical director, Dr. Rosell, does work closely with almost all the police departments in the county that are willing to work with us. He provides training and education. And, I don't know anything about what an officer comes out of the academy, what they're prepared to do or not do, not very much. But I know that, most of what they're going to encounter is conflict resolution, and they're not really prepared for that. And so, if you say this is a mental health crisis, and you ask them or you call Resolve, we won't get there as fast as they will, but we'll get there eventually. Or if you have another agency that you call there are some agencies, especially with adolescents and children, that have their own crisis. Family-based is one example. So the family-based, and there are 4 or 5 agencies that I think have that. They provide their own crisis, and we step back while they're in the home. So if you're able to do that, I think that's a great way to approach the call. And we have to keep training and educating officers to. I'm not going to go in and tackle an armed robbery. That's not going to do it. So they shouldn't go in and talk to somebody that's suicidal, but they do, and they give this advice, and you just get over it, kind of thing. And it's deplorable at times. But we have this model, and we have to work together. I don't see any other way to do it until we put other things in place. So if you're able to identify that it's a mental health crisis, most officers that deal with us, that we have relationships with, will say either have you call Resolve or should you call them, and they'll just kind of be on standby until either we or another agency gets there to deal with the crisis. If that makes sense.
I have done that many times where I've said, please be on standby. I don't want you to send an officer out. I did contact Resolve, but just know this is going on. And in particular, I do that because the neighbors might call first.
On the standpoint of training, because I think that's a really important question and probably feels a little bit like a black box to all of us. So my understanding, I think I got this right, is that there's a county training facility for police, and there's the county and city academies, police academies. I can't speak to what the curriculum is at the county academy. I do know that all police curriculum in the state of Pennsylvania is governed by the Municipal Police Officer Education and Training Commission. Got that right? The quality of that education is not something I can speak to, certainly across these academies. The city of Pittsburgh, we have, in our office, we have liaisons from each of the bureaus. We think about all of this work translationally, and so we realize, we need to talk to the community, we need to talk to the officers, we need to talk to the paramedics, to the firefighters, to the municipal investigations staff, certainly to our roots partners, whether that's outreach or responders. We don't think we know many things. But our liaison from Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, we work very closely with her. So Pittsburgh Academy has a 40-hour CIT curriculum, crisis intervention team, and I think that's what Mark was talking about, Dr. Roselle. We have actually, we got a grant to reinvigorate our CIT. I think it's important to note, though, that we don't intend to train police officers to become social workers, to become crisis responders. In fact, I think we also are very trepidatious about embedding social workers with officers. They're fundamentally different professions. That healthy tension is essential. You don't want your social workers to become police staff. It is something that I think a lot of departments have had to do because they have limited resources, and I commend them for the work that they're moving toward. We keep ours very separate, and that's intentional because we need our police to do police work. We need to define that, and we need them to do that well, and we need our social workers. But we do know that sometimes those officers get into situations like the guest here, where they are interceding or intervening in a situation that's very sensitive. So we do want to do our best to train them there. So they have a 40-hour CIT or crisis intervention team training that involves community members, specialists who work in this field to advocate and to train on IDD, intellectual and developmental disabilities, autism, presentation that people might have, why people might be scared, why people might fight back, what our initial reactions to that versus what's practically occurring, what happens with drug use, stigma, shame, harm reduction. It is a work in progress. I know our officers at the Academy have been very committed to that. They've invited our partner who runs the Reaching Out in the Streets team to do homelessness training. It's a very intensive training. We talk a lot about why people are outside and shame and oppression, and the fact that people being unsheltered is rarely the fault of the people who are unsheltered. It's oftentimes the deep complexity that we require people to navigate to get a night in shelter, to get a birth certificate. It's fundamentally shocking. I think watching people navigate COVID and be frustrated by all the bureaucracy. Imagine if you didn't have an address, and you didn't have a phone, and you didn't have a blanket, and you didn't have time, and you didn't have a place to stay. So anyways, I digress. But I do think there is training for the officers. I think the meaningful thing is that we invest in that diversity of responders. And I know Jody and Julian, you're asking what can we do now. I think there's been some great suggestions. I would say clear communication, which can be very stressful because you're already under duress. So clear communication and expectation setting, and advocacy, and to the degree possible, not getting in between people, because that actually can result in more escalated behavior by either person. So what does it look like to be a clearly communicating partner? It's a question that, as Sarah said, is a complex one. I will go back to the point, though, that in our region, we haven't invested in programs that would preempt police from going, and I think that's a major problem. I think there's a $500 million behavioral health budget at the county. That's 80% of the city's budget. I'll be honest, that's what we need to be talking about. Is yes, we need to train police officers, we need to support them, we need to support our community in knowing how to make a call. But we really need to talk about why the heck we don't have this continuum of responders, because we're 50 years late or more.
I'll jump in a little bit quicker. Let you guys have this one. I think these are really, really good and important questions. They're really urgent and critical. But very often we have to do both immediate and urgent work at the same time that we're also trying to do the work and put the pieces in place so that people don't fewer people at least get into the situation. So you don't just do the short-term work and then wait till later to do the long-term work. You kind of have to do both at the same time. And we know that our social safety nets really are breaking down, and our workers aren't big enough, and we have these staff problems because we have so many people in crisis, right? And so we really do need to think about what are those social determinants of health and social determinants of mental health, and then again, each of us in our various jurisdictions, what can we do better so that we are, I don't talk about it, but reopening those rec centers, that was something that almost 3,500 people mentioned in emails to us, but really having the services that are easier to navigate, to maybe not be facing imminent homelessness, to maybe not be food insecure, to maybe not having a child care crisis, to maybe being able to pay your utility bills, right? These are things that are not harmful and in keeping yourself out of crisis. And so if we have those safety nets as well, and those are big and complicated problems, each of them. So we have to start that work and make more progress on that work too, because it really is much harder to go backwards once again someone is unhoused or someone is really their life is falling apart and they're in a crisis. It's a lot harder than it would be if we had stronger supports to prevent that. So it's doing all the work at the same time.
I'm going to ask just a quick question because we're running on. I think we're going to get 7:30. I know that there is a directory that's maybe not really an official directory of police and their history or core history. I'm just wondering if we use that in our work to determine who we send out, who is put in a certain place, if there is some sort of record of their behavior or misbehaviors of whatever that is. I forget what the record is called.
I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, there's a directory, there's a national directory of police history, especially like misbehavior. I don't know what the directory is called, but I know that it's not an official directory that everyone uses. We're supposed to kind of reference it, especially when they're being hired at other departments and things of that nature, but I know it's not an official record. But I was wondering if us in the Harvard's have ever looked at that directory or anything like that.
Can you speak to them? Do you know?
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I will say there it gets into a little bit of the kind of Act 111 barriers and arbitration and how the city has fired officers and then been ordered by courts to bring them back in service because they just were required to by law because of state preempting some of our ability to control the workforce in ways we do with other departments. So there's special state laws about police and what you can do for an individual police officer in that area. Right. So that's a whole separate frustrating topic.
So yes, there was a statewide coalition working towards Act 111 and amending that because exactly what Councilwoman Rose said, police officers are able to arbitrate their jobs back. But as far as the council, that list that you just referenced, I have heard of that. However, at the county level, we would have really little bit of influence there because the municipalities control their police departments, and however, we do have this county dispatch, so we could possibly explore that from the dispatch level. No.
So we have one more question before we wrap up. Again, we wanted to thank everyone for coming. We didn't get to a lot of the audience questions, but if our panelists don't mind, I can put these in writing and email them out, and then we can, the responses that we get over the next, week or so, we'll give you folks some time. We'll publish those on our Facebook, just like a doc. Definitely, some great questions that we do want answers for. But, this is a big conversation, and I hope we got some good information and had a good discussion. But just, and also now, I'm going to be holding space here till 11 o'clock, so, this heavy topic, if people
want to keep, talking about it, share your experience, still have questions, I will be hanging out. We have the room. So once we wrap up, people certainly don't need to leave. We can hold seats. So my last question, for, probably more of our, city, county political folks, is we talked a lot about how, making changes long-term are going to require monetary and systematic investment and changes to the current status quo. What can we, as citizens, as community members, do to support, initiatives, budgets, programs that support, alternatives to policing, enhance our social safety nets, address these issues? Where can our, advocacy, voice, organizing be most helpful and directed?
So first, I will say, yes. So and I'm speaking strictly for the county. And my first response would be to show up to the budget hearings, because nobody, and I mean nobody, shows up to our budget hearings. And we have over $1 billion, and yes, that's with a B, $1 billion budget, and we're talking about how to allocate that not only to the county agencies, but also when we're getting ARPA and CARES Act and allocations, opioid crises, money is about to come through the county. That is allocated out to the municipalities, and if we're not hearing from you, the squeaky wheel gets oiled. So that's my first response, is show up, because when y'all show up, things happen. When y'all showed up for banning fracking in the park and we listened for 3 hours to 100 comments, that passed. We had to fight, but we got it done. When y'all showed up to do the Independent Police Review Board, that took time as well. But guess what? We got it done. And so for me, when we hear from you and we get that public push, I think the things that we've gotten done on the county, this has probably been the most active county council that has ever existed. And that's because, y'all have been really pushing us. We couldn't have done some of those things if y'all weren't in the streets for George Floyd and those protests. We couldn't have gotten certain things done if y'all weren't showing up to county council meetings with your protest signs, taking your 3 minutes in your space. I say do that for everything. Secondly, I will say, you reach out to us with your ideas and your policy, because we don't work, I'll speak for myself. I don't work in a silo. I ran on co-governing, and I believe in co-governing. And there have been definite policies that have come from you all and have been passed, right? I have a piece of legislation sitting in committee right now that came from one of my constituents who wants to see Columbus Day changed into Indigenous Peoples Day. So that is not authored. Yes, my name is on it, but that came from a constituent. So we listen to you. I listen to you. Your ideas. If you want to work on anything with us, we are open to that. I know many of my colleagues on council will also be open to that as well. So reach out to us. Let us know. And again, I'm going to go back to rule number 1. Show up.
We'll have a lot of days that we'll come and we'll testify at county council for the budget next December, right? When you have your hearings, right?
October.
We'll go starting on October, because it really does seem to be, I think, as this has been a recurring theme tonight, an assessment of how you're spending, how the county is spending those federal dollars. And we're still seeing so many people in crisis, right? Not that our crisis responders aren't there trying to do it, but what can we do this preventative work as well? So I think that's important. And I will always echo the budget hearing, call to action. So we had the same thing at the city. We keep ours on YouTube now, which is fantastic. So you can go back and look at 2023's budget hearings that happened for us also in November and December. And then the really upside of that is that you can kind of watch them in double speed or just scroll through. But it was on the old clunky software, you couldn't do that. So you didn't want to go pull up the old 2-hour budget hearing and feel good about it. But now you can kind of go right to the part you want. So you can see how we've had these conversations with the various city departments, including the police department and all of their public safety issues. Same thing with post agendas and public hearings that we've had. They're there in the record, so you can go back and see what those conversations are. But we're also in session more than our county council colleagues. I always tell people pretty much every Tuesday and Wednesday, although tomorrow's a double session because of the holiday this week, you can show up and have your 3 minutes, right? And now you can Zoom and have your 3 minutes. So it's even a little easier. You don't have to come all the way downtown. Almost every week of our lives, right? The only couple of weeks we take off when we're not in session and have to hear from you by law is in August, a couple of weeks a year. So you have an opportunity every week of your life to tell us what you're thinking. And people do, and you should too. And so, and then you can also reach our offices. My office phone is 412-255-2140. Every council member's got a page on the city website. Sometimes they're a little hard to find. I'm on social media, so you can kind of send, and if you have good thoughts or good ideas, we definitely make them. Appreciate it. Thank
And
you
for
all.
county council, we meet twice a month, every single month. It's a little wonky in the July, August, because of, us trying to get a break. So that it's like the very beginning of July, the very end of August. But other than that, we're usually meeting every other Tuesday. Also very weird, it's at 5 o'clock, so I don't know if that's the most convenient thing, but in the middle of downtown at the courthouse. But we also do stream ours as well, so you can look for ours to be streamed. You can go to the county council page to find that link, and you can watch ours live. Unfortunately, now that I know y'all are doing comments by Zoom, I'm an advocate for that, because you have to actually come to county council and comment, which, we've been trying to kind of fight against, but that's how it is right now. But stay tuned. We might be able to use city council as our example of how to get this comments being able to be virtual.
Yeah, well, thank you. Also, I just want to say to our panelists, take up some time, save some room, but other than that, we are ending.